United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Just wanted to see if anybody would notice, but it would speed it up. So welcome to our May 16th Tiverton School Committee meeting. Anyone signed up for open forum? Although we're not technically posted, it looks like, but
not technically or really.
Yeah. So we are here to review the FY24 budget. Dr. Sanchioni.
Mr. Chairman, we'll bring up some slides, provide some information, consideration. I know you've got this in the package, so hopefully you're looking there. I know that the numbers are very difficult to read. The bottom one with the cream color is the original documentation that we provided to you and provided to the town council. And the numbers in there are accurate. There's debate about how they came from, audited and so forth. And then working with them, there were some other numbers that were voted and so forth, so we adjusted it in light blue color above. And, there's not a huge variance and so on and so forth. It's just important to understand that you have the town contribution in % increase over the last 9 years. And you can see the numbers there. There's 2.18000, 0.10, 4.36, 1.30, 3.
Dr. Sanchioni, you don't have your microphone.
And 3 something last year, and then that always corresponds with state aid, and state aid ebbs and flows as you've seen in the past. And the last column over in the light blue is really the important numbers. That's how much our budget increases overall, right? So again, you go down the list, it's 1.90, 0.62, 0.57, 0.91, 1.14, 5.48, 0.74, 1 point something, 3.15. And so those numbers are drastically low. They're always below what our accounts are, what our increases are for energy, for transportation, special education. Even our contract obligations are below that. And again, it's how the structural deficit was created, or deficit, whatever you want to call it. I know people struggle with the terminology, structural deficit. The important thing to know this year is we haven't plugged in all the numbers because state aid isn't finalized, but if we take into account what's currently allocated by the state and what was allocated by the town council on Saturday, our overall budget increase will be 1.4%. So 1.4% leaves you in a very precarious situation. So I want to show that to you in a few other slides now. I'm going to come back to this and show this to you here. So we started with a projected level service budget, which means everything we're doing this year, move it ahead 1 year, account for all.
Dr. Sanchioni, could I just ask you one question before we move forward? And all right, you have it on this page. I apologize. What was the appropriation from the town council? It's 34,264. Yep. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for cleaning it up, Danny. Although I will need that bottom number too at some point. All right, so we started with our projected budget, and I'll use round numbers, 36.2 million. That's everything we're doing this year, move it ahead, no new programs, no new staff, just paying the bills. I'm going to show you some reductions momentarily to kind of bring us to a number that may be achievable, and I'll explain what the 642,000 is. If you agree with those reductions, that would bring the level service budget down to, and it's really not level service anymore because we are cutting services, but a budget of 35,574,366. If everything stays the same as we are currently situated with what the town council allocated and what the state has allocated, our budget is 34,264,336. So if you separate between what our budget necessarily is, the 35.5 million from the 34, if you subtract that, you bring up that bottom line, Danny. And, that's all right, Danny. It's 1.3 million.
In our slide, it says 1.3.
Yes.
In the one we have.
Yep, and it's up there too. It just sunk below because of the screen. So
$1,310,030. So that's the deficit your face was addressing tonight. So I'm going to come back to the 642,000 now to get you to the 1.3, which is a little more obtainable. And I'm going to recommend to you that, take me back 2 slides, Danny. Yes, right there, thank you. So we looked at our expense accounts, and we feel like we can make some reductions there to the tune of 253,284. Based upon some technology accounts, we were able to obtain some grants to offset some of the things we wanted to do in the technology accounts. Professional development, we can cut that because we're going to move that to the Title II grant. Some of the leases on our copiers are being changed out, and as a result of that, the cost has come down. We feel like we can make some reductions there. We just trimmed some general supplies and material accounts, and we are expecting these solar credits. And so we're going to take a shot and say that they're coming. From every indication they should be. We should start realizing that on our bills this fiscal year, and as a result, we'd make those changes there. So that's one level of cuts. As you know, our budget is really just 2 separate entities. It's personnel and it's every other expense. So this is the every other expense part of our budget. And then I recommend to you the reduction of 6 positions. We can talk more specifically about that when we're in executive session, but that would total out to 389,000. So if you add up the expense reduction of the 253 and the 389, that gives you that 642 I was showing you. So if you agree with that, we come back here, and there it is. Thank you, Danny. That would create the budget of $35,574,000. And that creates the deficit of 1.3 million. And then you currently have available in the fund balance $1,071,367, and Medicaid, as we sit on April 30th, or as of today, is $839,959. That totals 1.9 million. If you were to take that amount and then cover that structural deficit, the 1.3 million, again, we wouldn't have to make any further cuts to personnel or expenses, and it would leave 600,000 balance between whatever account you wanted to leave it in, so you would have a cushion going into FY24. So having looked at every line item and gone through this budget painstakingly with Amy, these are our recommendations this evening for you to consider. And we'll leave it there.
Thank you, Peter. I'm going to open up the floor to discussion. I don't know that we can really make a motion at this point. Mrs. Pavo?
I appreciate the hard work both of you put into this, and I like some of what I see. So I think we need to continue going through everything, but I do appreciate what you've done this week.
Mr. Dakotas?
Yeah, I'll echo Mr. Pavo's sentiments. Thank you for getting here. I know we talked about last year, we talked about the Medicaid funds. We talked about how we were going to spend that if we needed to spend it. Now we're here, right? We talked about that, 6 months ago? We talked about this. I will say 2 things. This is my 3rd year here with doing the budget process. I think we've cut every year. I've been here, right? We've been cutting, trying to maintain what we have.
We didn't cut last year, but that was because of ESSER.
ESSER, sorry. Yes. So that bailed us out last year. But we knew, we talked about it extensively, that this year we would have to cut. We knew that. So I'll say 2 things to sum it up. I think we are fiscally responsible. We're putting forth the budget to the taxpayers that I think is not bloated. We're not raising everything up. We're not asking for a lot. And I will say this on record, I am somewhat pleased, or not, if not pleased, with the council budget committee working with us to get us this money. And I think if we work together like this, we'll be okay down the road going forward. So, thank you.
Mrs. Palish?
First, I do appreciate as well, I know we had asked you to go back and look at the expenses, and, you know, I know that's not easy, so I do thank you for looking at that, because obviously anything we can save through expenses means we saved a personnel. So thank you both for doing that. Fund balance, so that's as of the audit, which is 6/30/22. I'm anticipating FY '23, Amy, is not going to be a surplus. I know we had a couple of things. So FY '23, do we anticipate having anything that's going to go back into the fund balance? I would say no, only because I know we had a couple of expenses that we did not anticipate.
Correct.
That I'm thinking are going to, okay, so that's not going to go up, I guess is my
Or
question.
not, I'm not expecting it to go up by much.
By much.
Again, I would call it roughly break even one way or the other.
Okay. And then the Medicaid, again, that's April 30th. So if we go through April, May 2024, you know, that we will add to, which gives us a little bit more cushion.
You are correct.
So,
Correct.
so that's a good thing. The last thing I will say, this will get us through this budget season, but that 1.3 million is still looming. So we're not going to have fund balance next year to say, oh, well, we'll just offset that. You both know that. I'm just sort of getting it out there that this gets us through this year. I appreciate that we're trying to close the deficit by making some cuts, but, you know, I think the math I was doing, we're looking at about 1.3 million in cuts next year if you assume an increase and then the cap. So certainly there's, you know, this'll get us through, but and we can talk more about it in an upcoming meeting. I think we really need to start rolling in the fiscal year, July right away, talking about how we're going to address FY '25, because I think the FY '25 is going to lead to some really challenging discussions. But I do appreciate the work. And that's it on the detail. I do think, when I was watching, I think the town council budget's off by like $10, but we can live with that.
It was, yeah.
Yeah. I think it was 340, you said.
Yeah, I noticed the same thing. I was just like, I'm not gonna even get there. $10, I'll give you the $10.
But just for transparency,
Yeah.
we did note it.
Yep. Ms. Farnworth?
And I will again thank the two of you for all the hard work that's gone into this and for your willingness to turn on the dime and appear before our town council, not once but twice with little notice, and that's most appreciated. Just a couple, you know, I think Mrs. Polish makes some very good points, right? The cuts we are looking at potentially in FY '25 are going to be devastating, and I don't have any level of comfort that it's going to be anything but cuts, frankly. So the faster we start having very candid discussions over, you know, the future of what education is going to look like in Tiverton, the better. We've attempted to have these discussions over the course of several months last year, talking about our structural deficit, and clearly it's not something that's been well understood, or I would even say believed by the leadership of the town. Can I ask you, if we're looking at 1.3 million for this year that we're looking to make up, how does that compare to where we were last year? Is that more or less?
Are you asking about
And
doctors?
I apologize, I just thought of it now, and if you need more time to get.
So last year was all lesser, right?
Yes,
No, but there was, we've been studying the structural
No,
deficit.
yeah, right.
Do you
Well,
remember?
it
Well, 1.1, give
So
or
it's
take.
increased.
It's a tiny bit.
And I think it has generally increased every year since we've been studying it, so one could assume that next year we'd be looking at 1.5 wouldn't be out of the question at all. right?
because
Continued
the revenue
contractual
Is being
obligations.
outpaced by the expenses at a
Yes.
greater percentage.
Absolutely. So it's something, that really even calls more attention to this. It's a real problem. The other question I have is more of a bookkeeping question, if you will. Now that the special ed region will be dissolving, will you maintain a separate Medicaid fund balance? Will you continue to account for it separately?
Yes,
Okay.
we're required to do that.
You are required to, okay.
It will not be combined with the school fund balance.
Okay, and we'll see those reports on a monthly basis of where we are?
We will.
Okay, thank you. I don't think that, and you mentioned grants funding technology. What kind of grants are we talking about?
So, well, thanks to working with Danny in his conversations with some folks at E-Rate who help us with not only our internet service, also some of our cabling projects, the emergency connectivity fund and so forth. We have been made aware of some grants that we are in the process of putting in applications for next year that we weren't aware of previously. So in particular, the emergency connectivity fund is still that was generated under COVID is still ongoing. We thought it had ended and it was a one-time thing, but we're now able to, partake of that as long as those funds are available. So we put in an application every year, and some years it's funded, some years it isn't. So Danny is a really good resource for connecting with the vendors and asking them for technology resources. And then he comes in my office and so kudos to Danny for finding it. And so we've had a couple of conversations about some other grants that just aren't practical for us to apply for or unlikely that we'll get. But if they come through, I sit there and I bug Dr. Sanchioni and we fill out all the documentation and the assurances and send it in. And then we're expecting for technology, some of that to come through for FY24.
Very good, very good. I congratulate you for being ahead of this and encourage you to continue. Because it only helps the students here.
Mm-hmm, it does.
I will note, however, that is a one-time revenue source, and
It is one time, however, in some instances, if we use it for Chromebooks, that carries us several years.
Nice.
The
Oh,
replacement,
gotcha. Okay.
or if it's.
One-time purchases?
Or
One-time
one-time purchases,
purchases.
or we can purchase multi-year software contracts. So even though
nice.
it's a one-time funding source, we can get more than 1 year out of that grant, if that makes sense.
oh, that's nice, yes, no, I
So,
see
anywhere
exactly what you're
between,
saying.
anywhere between like 2 to 4 years, depending on what we're talking about, whether it's a license or software or Chromebooks or
Which
so
is
forth.
super helpful, okay,
So,
thanks.
but yes, one time, duly noted, and not guaranteed the following year,
Yeah.
obviously but for as often as we
Yeah,
can
although,
apply.
I mean, you got the ESSER funds, these kind of grants, the work that you guys are doing, trying to cover things that aren't being covered through our appropriation is just very much appreciated.
That was all I had.
Okay, thanks. So, Amy, so one of the things that has been a point of discussion with the town council is that where did the fund balance come from? And I know we spoke to that on Saturday morning. I was wondering would you be in a position to actually talk about that a little bit right now? Because I think one of the things that is a misconception is that the fund balance is because we are running in the black each year over year. And that's not the case from what I understand as you described it.
That is not the
Can you gloss
case.
that a little bit for
Sure.
myself and the public and the rest of the committee?
Certainly. The last 3 years or so is what I understood to be in question. So I started with our audited fund balance as of June 30, 2019, which was about $1.3 million. That year, we had several expenses For example, like Wit and Wisdom, we purchased the new truck. We did certain things with that fund balance. And then we had some special ed overages or operational overages, and we actually reduced that fund balance by $857,000, which brought us down to just under $500,000. The following year, and I'm sorry, that was at June 30, 2020. The following year, which is sort of the first year that we were back during COVID, it was after the shutdown, but so for example, we had certain services for special education were not in person like they were or as frequent due to COVID restrictions and things like that. So we were billed less than we were anticipated. We also happened to receive a fund balance refund from the region for the audit of the prior year, which was a one-time, I guess, revenue source, if you want to call it that. But we also had some overages in terms of statewide transportation that would offset these income sources or savings income sources. We also had to buy some textbooks. That's when we started doing some of our capital planning. We had the architect fees. And so the net increase as a result of sort of those handful of things and several others was $526,000 surplus for that year, but only due to circumstances related to COVID. It wasn't like, well, we're squirreling away $500,000 and we'll put it over there for later. It was really a virtue of the pandemic circumstances. And then last year, we came in within $51,000 of the budget, a little bit in the black, but I would call that statistically even. And
I was going to say, people need to understand, we're budgeting a year out in advance, 15 months out in advance. Some years we did 18 months out in advance. On a $34 million budget to come in at 51,000, that's
a statistical tie, basically, or
right.
basic,
That's
you know.
running some pretty tight budget controls there, Amy.
Yeah, and we expect to do the same for this year. You know, I suspended what I call discretionary spending back after the first of the calendar year, just knowing we had some anticipated maintenance and repair expenses. Unanticipated maintenance, repair expenses, and other things that we needed to purchase. And so I'm expecting that will come in, like I said, give or take similarly for FY23. So we're certainly not padding the budget in order to build up the fund balance and asking for that much more from the town. That's not the case.
Okay, so just if I can make 3 points then there. One is, as Deb was alluding to, a public entity with the volatility that comes with our transportation, special education, and energy costs to come in at $50,000 is amazing. If you understand that $350,000 is approximately 1% of our budget.
Correct.
You're talking something like 0.1 or 0.2% variability from budgeted to actual.
Correct.
So that's quite a feat, particularly for education. The second is that we're not banking money year over year. That the fund balance is the Medicaid money, and then also circumstances that related to the pandemic, where because kids were at home, which is a worse place for them overall educationally, we did not have some of the transportation and special education expenses that we'd normally
Correct.
have.
Correct.
But all of those expenses have reappeared.
They have.
So it's that was the savings. It was not, sort of overtaxed or over budgeted or padded money. And then so that's where the fund balance comes from, and it's not likely to be replenished in this budget year. If we allocated a certain amount of, if we allocate a certain amount of money to try and make the operations whole, that's not gonna come back in this budget year from savings anywhere.
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you. And again, I appreciate all the work that you've done. I think it's also important to understand that the 3% that was allocated by the town council, you always have to also understand that any year that there's a decrease in state aid, so in this case, about $330,000, or at least that's the projection, and nobody knows what it will ultimately be. But if there is decreases in state aid, as there is this year of about $330,000, again, about 1%. So of those 3% that is allocated by the town and the local levy, 1% of that is only is going to make up the shortfall in state aid, if you will.
Correct.
Or the decrease in state aid.
Correct.
So the local levy is only adding 2% to the overall budget
I
of the
actually think it's
school.
less than that.
It's
When I did, it's like
1.4.
1.4.
1.4%.
Okay, all right.
Because I did the math too.
I won't,
It's
yeah,
actually 1.4.
I won't quibble with the percentages, but I think it's just important to understand that allocation, as much as it is, appreciated, is, a significant chunk of that is going towards making up anticipated decreases in state aid right at this point.
Correct.
And then I guess the other point I want to make is that in the discussion about two things. The reason why the state aid is going down is because the real value of the town, so the estate, the calculated value of all the real estate in the town increased a lot, as did actually median income, from what I understand.
Correct.
And that's why the state aid is going down.
Correct.
Exactly.
Based
Two
on,
driving
it's,
factors.
So it's, it's I guess one instance where if you get a raise, it's actually a bad thing for the town's state aid. And then lastly, the point I want to make is that, there's always, really, for 10 years at least, or more, 12, I guess, in terms of the amount of time I've been involved in at least watching these things, there's always a, robust discussion of people not being able to afford their property tax, and I'm certainly sympathetic to that argument. And I would, really ask the council and the town to sort of say, okay, well, let's look at that and sort of think about how we provide relief to people who are on fixed incomes. There's ways of doing that, and frankly, shifting the tax burden to people who are wealthier. That seems a reasonable and just way to approach this, rather than saying, people can't pay their taxes, and therefore we are, we never cite the parents, I think, and that's our job, is to advocate for the parents who say, yes, taxes may be X, Y, or Z, but I also want to say I want my children educated in a fair and appropriate fashion, so that they can, fulfill their aspirations, and eventually, I guess, go on to pick all of our nursing homes. So always keep that in mind as well. If you don't like the price of education, try ignorance. So,
correct.
again, I'll get off my soapbox now. Those are the only comments I have, but I also appreciate your coming to those meetings, and we will go where we go. So I guess now, what is the pleasure of the committee to formally approve those recommendations, or if somebody has something else, feel free.
I did.
Go ahead.
The one piece of information that we need to consider before we take any action is this vote that the town council took on Saturday final?
No.
So how are we expecting to make our decisions final?
Well, that's exactly my question, I guess, is I think there are two things. One is, if we are eliminating positions, we have to give notice
By June 1st, correct?
by June 1st.
You have to
Well,
do it,
so-
you have to do it
But we
next
can,
Tuesday.
but you can call them back.
Yeah.
Ken,
So
you have to
That's
vote.
what, we have to do it.
So that part has to be driven, but to answer the question of, is the way I understand the charter, and when I spoke with members of the town council, this is how they understand it as well. But as with, I guess, every other budget in Tiverton, it's unique within the universe. The vote they took on Saturday was the preliminary budget. They now proceed with the town financial hearing, which I think is June 5th. Is that what they said?
Yeah.
So June 5th, and then they technically have up until June 30th to adopt the final budget. And,
So
you know.
we are susceptible to change right up till June 30th.
I believe so.
And
even past
And
that.
even beyond, should there be a challenge, which
Yes,
is
up or down.
almost.
I mean, the only, maintenance of effort is there, but other than that, and.
All our
you know,
votes are gonna have to be preliminary
anybody-
because it's not final until,
I agree, they're going to have to be preliminary, and I do think that we need to be prepared for them to actually reduce it. Because we have
Well,
no guarantee that they won't.
I think in terms of, yeah, you're right.
I mean,
And so
to
we
me,
could-
that's what the responsible thing is
Yeah,
to do. We have to
so-
be prepared.
So then you'd say, okay, then we need to assume, and that's exactly what happened in 2020, and that's what we had to do, was we assumed level funding, and that's exactly what we got. Unfortunately, that was, we acquiesced in that, and if I had to do it over again, I wouldn't. I would have said, no, we're gonna put the school's budget on the referendum. But we didn't really know what was going on in
And we need
August
to
of
remember
2020.
that
but,
now
but
as
it
well.
could
No, I know.
also,
I know.
we could get more aid.
That's also
So,
true.
so all of it is just a one big unknown right now.
It is.
Correct. So, the only thing that the charter changes don't change is the dates that we have to give notice to employees by, if their positions are.
They can't control that, that's the state.
No, I know they can't, I know, that's why, but everything, and, I mean, I would recommend that after the dust is settled on all of this, that we engage with the town council and say, okay, we adopted this process, how was that for you? Because I'm not sure it was great for us. I'm not sure that we
I
have the
went in front
budget
of them
to-
last summer, tried to make some suggestions, and those weren't heard. Maybe
I know,
after a
I
year's
know.
worth of experience, they
Well,
will be.
that's the thing, those who do not live by the past are doomed to repeat it,
But it
which
it's
is
still.
true in Tiverton, for
but it-
sure.
It still just doesn't change my concern that if we take action here this evening and we don't protect ourselves from further reductions, how are we going to react if there are further reductions? I don't want to drain the fund balance to zero.
So the only thing that is calendar sensitive in a way is reducing positions. Now, you could say, okay, should we reduce positions then to a level, so if the town council came back and said, we are giving you $1 over FY '23, you could make an argument that we should reduce positions and other expenses, or plan to reduce other expenses to that, because of the fact that we need to give notice. I don't know, it's kind of a.
That would be what, like 1-point-something million if we
It'd be
just got
another
$1?
$750,000.
Yeah, 733 to be
So, yeah.
exact.
It would be basically FY '25 happening a year early.
So
Correct.
again, for the, the local appropriation was about 26 million last year.
Yep.
So their 1% is $250,000 roughly. So they voted 3%, so $750,000 roughly, I'm not,
No, so MOE is off the total appropriation. So if we got the total appropriation, essentially level fund from last year, the 30 whatever
33,
million.
531.
okay.
What
Yeah,
kind of
that's
cut would that be?
An additional 733,000
So 1.23 million,
total?
No, it'd
or
be more.
1.4 million.
No, 2 million, because it's 1.3.
Oh,
And if
plus-
you-
plus the
the
7. That's what I was trying to get at.
It's 2 million to 2.1
So
million.
Diane, don't see us having protective cuts of $2 million.
no, it wouldn't be that much.
It wouldn't be an additional $2 million, would it be an additional 700,000?
No, it
Maybe
would,
additional
but
700.
prior
A little
to
over 700.
authorizing the fund balance and the
So-
Medicaid.
If the MOE's off the total appropriation, then the town would be required to give us at least 1%, because that's the
$1.
reduction.
$1. So what was last year's
Whatever's off the
budget?
total.
33 million.
531, 278.
Exactly.
33,
So
531.
that would be the budget. So if that was the budget, and you have, go back a slide.
34,264, 336.
Nope, go back a slide, Danny. He's not there. Danny,
It makes the structural deficit $2 million.
that's so 36,216 minus whatever the last year's budget. That's what we'd be looking at. Ignore the 642. I'm just looking for a total number. So 36,216 is the projected budget minus last year's budget of whatever it was.
35,531, 278.
Yeah. It's like 1.3 million.
That's the deficit now.
Right, that's what I'm saying, so you want to do protective cuts equal to 1.3 million?
No, that's what we're already planning for with a withdrawal from the fund balances and the expense cuts and the layoffs already planned. That's how we're planning to fill that gap now. The question is, if they pull back and give us less money, right, on the worst that could happen is that we lose another $733,000
Right.
above and beyond
Right.
what
Correct.
we're looking at now. And the question is, how would we get through that?
And I guess we're kind of saying the same thing. I'm like, so you want to have protective cuts that equal 1.3 million, 642 plus another 700 something.
Correct.
I don't see, I mean, unless, we want to continue digging into the expense accounts. And I don't even know if we could find $750,000 in there.
You can't.
Not even close, right?
You can't.
I mean,
You have to
I
shut
don't
the
see
lights
any other
off.
way around it, but to issue preemptive layoff notices with the dear hope we can call them back. I don't think that the changes to the charter have really accounted for the fact that we
Yeah.
have to act before
No, they
June
didn't.
1st.
No, they didn't.
They don't, well, that's my point,
It may
the-
change next year, but right now,
How much is left in the fund balance? 600,000?
If we were to
600
use,
if we vote.
Right now.
600, 296.
So, to your point, I get it. And you're right, what the charter changes do not account for is the fact that we have to give these layoff notices. We can't give them after July 1st, which is when.
Can't give them after June 1st.
Well, no, I know, but I'm just saying, so they have until June 30th, but that actually puts us in a real bind. And I guess that's my point about saying, I certainly didn't realize that implication of the charter changes last year. And, I think we can all speak a little bit more precisely to them now that we've kind of gone through this process, and I hope they are open to that discussion, because while there are some things that I think are positive about the new budget process, there are things that I am less positive about, and this is certainly one of them.
But they're not,
I'm-
the downside is if you move it up to accommodate that, now you don't have the state aid number.
Right,
So it's
yeah.
half a
No,
one,
it's-
yeah.
So I think we have to, in a practical matter, as a practical matter, I think we have to proceed with the number they voted in, on Saturday. We are acting in good faith. If they, that's going to be an interesting meeting. If
Good faith in politics. Yeah.
there's no justice in politics. We all know that. And there's
If I was
little,
running a business-
there's little good faith. So, but I don't know that we can. I don't think we can in any way really find another. What was it? $750,000.
733,058.
Yeah. I just don't think we can. And if you want to talk about good faith, they go back to the town council and say, we are incapable of laying these people off that you just caught. So now tell us what happens. We're all in Superior Court? I don't know.
Again,
That,
So that comes back to, if push comes to shove and we're talking about personnel, would we be in favor of draining every single dollar of that fund balance before we lay off another person? Because that's there. That's the other question.
Yeah.
Is,
Well, would it,
instead of,
would
you know,
that make, would it cover it? I guess it would, wouldn't it?
it would.
No,
If
it wouldn't
you
cover
say
it.
600 and you say, well, during the year, we're going to have, again, we're going to have Medicaid during the year, you could make it work. Because that Medicaid is only as of April. So if you agreed to drain every single bit of fund balance, every single bit of Medicaid, that would, in the awful event that we only get $1, that
Or
would
we-
prevent us from having to lay off more personnel.
And then we get another child that moves into the district, we've heard this story a million times,
Yes.
that needs high special
Right.
needs services.
So-
And then you have to go to the council and you say, we need
Oh,
money.
okay, so that'll be a fun
Well,
process.
and then they can take us over and say, they can ask Middletown how that worked out for them.
I'm
Yeah.
not saying, I'm just
Yeah,
saying that
yeah.
is an alternative. I'm not saying that's the correct alternative. I'm just pointing out that is an alternative.
My view is the most reasonable thing to do is to make the personnel cuts that we have to make by statute tonight, when we were in executive, and not try and make additional personnel cuts, recognizing that we do have an opportunity to certainly to voice our opinion in the financial town hearing, as well
Well,
as
can-
whatever meeting they have.
Can we
in
get
order to-
I know we probably don't have anything, not taking definite votes, but can we get a consensus of what the majority of the board feels?
Yes. Yeah, so, I just voiced my opinion. Elaine, you wanna, what's your thought?
Dr. Sanchioni, but would you be prepared tonight to
Tell us that.
give us, no, to give us a number of, a dollar number or a number for more additional personnel cuts? You wouldn't be prepared to do that tonight because you would have to probably go down a list and, I mean, you've got a number in your head that we're going to discuss in executive session, but going beyond that, you're not prepared to do that tonight.
Well, we're always prepared, right? We have lists, and we know who's on the list, and you just reflect back on the presentation the principals made to you,
Okay.
and that's the next level.
Okay,
So it's not a
All
good
right.
place to go.
okay, thank you.
Mike?
So Elaine, are you in favor of cutting the 750 or not in favor?
I would be in favor of
Or did you
cutting more
want to just?
personnel because we could pull that back.
Okay. Or did
I
you-
don't want to drain, I don't want to, look at this, I don't want to drain every penny we have,
Potentially.
potentially, yes.
That's not what we would necessarily.
I don't
be-
like any of it, but
Yeah.
Okay, so you would not be in favor of just balancing to the 34, the 3%? No, that's what I heard. Which, that's fine,
I don't think so.
okay.
Mike?
So I assume other towns are in the same boat, correct?
No.
Are we the only ones in this?
We are the only budget process like this in the entire universe.
I'm not aware of any of my colleagues making
Okay,
drastic cuts.
that was my question, okay. So, because we have no exemplar, right, to go from, we're creating it as we go. So, the words "good faith" were used. We'd like to think it's gonna be good faith, right? Because we're all the same town, right? Our kids are affected by any cuts, anything we have to cut. I don't like cutting the fund balance to zero. I don't want to do that. I wouldn't want to drain my savings account to zero. I would be hospitalized if I.
Yeah, so if I could just interrupt for a second. So the two choices are, as Deb put it, balancing to the 3%. That's one choice. The second is, because they actually have until June 30th, do we balance to allow to no increase? And that would, because that would have to involve additional personnel cuts, which have to be made by June 1st, then we would have to proceed in that way. And as I said, I favor balancing to the 3%, but.
So the two logics are what Dr. Larkin just said, good faith, balance to 3%, worst case scenario, we were down to nothing, or what Ms. Pavo said, be a little more conservative, knowing we can pull people back after.
Yeah, if I
No,
may,
during summer.
And
Mr. Chairman.
Can I have the floor for a moment, too? Because
Actually, Mike has it right now.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay.
We'll come back to you guys.
Okay.
For sure.
If you're going to say something, I'd love to hear it before you pass
No,
on.
no, go ahead.
And I'm done. That was what I wanted to say.
I thought you were, and I apologize,
No, no.
Mike.
You were going to say something.
So why don't we let Peter go and then you can go.
Sure.
So you're not going to pull them back, just know that. You're going to take some highly trained teachers, people we've invested in for the last 3 years. They're going to get that layoff notice, and they're going to apply for every vacancy out there, and they're going to leave. And we're going to be stuck hiring people in August and not getting the high quality that we have now. It's not just pulling them back. It's
Okay,
not
so
gonna
so
happen.
that's what we want to hear, right? We want to hear
It's not that
the
simple.
the probability of what's going to happen if we go that route. So with that being said, now my mind is a little more in line with what Dr. Larkin said, because we don't want to lose good people. We don't want to lose anyone, but we
Exactly.
don't want to lose good people. So, thank you.
Mrs. Farnworth.
You make a very good point. And I don't want to lose one person. However, I still have very large concerns over, and I see this, and I realize it's a school district, but at the end of the day, when we're talking budget, this is a business, right? Talking about the numbers, the ins, the outs, it's a business. And for any business not to adequately plan for contingencies, should there be a loss of revenue, I think is irresponsible. With that said, it may not be the right answer to just send out a bunch of layoff notices, because you're right. A lot of these people, they'll just go on, we're going to lose our youngest employees, right, who have the least amount to lose, and they will go looking for alternative positions elsewhere. They need to. I wouldn't blame them. It's not a position where we were 20 years ago, where there were no jobs and, people would wait it out. I understand that. I think, though, if that's going to be the approach, and I don't want to risk losing the entire fund balance either, because I think that, too, is irresponsible. We've had a couple of times where you've had to come to us and ask to withdraw from that fund balance for emergency purchases. We had an issue, right, at Ranger for their HVAC system, right, last year. We've had to purchase a truck before. We've had any number of emergency, if you will, purchases that we've approved out of the fund balance. And of course, there's the ever looming, what if the special ed costs fluctuate in a way that we never could have anticipated, I don't ever want to have to go back in front of the town council for additional funding in any given year. I don't want to ever do it. So there's got to be a way where we're at least protected to the point where I'm not suggesting they're going to cut us to zero. I don't think they ever will. But the whole concept of trust really can't be part, in my view, shouldn't be part of the financial discussion. We have to have the contingencies. We have to be ready to act should we need to. That's my argument.
Good.
I think listening to the council members on Saturday on tape, I think there's several who wouldn't even entertain going below 3%. And is that faith in them? Yes, but we do still have an FTR. You could still have somebody put in an alternate budget and have it,
And just remember, it's not us. We're no longer allowed to challenge.
Electors.
correct.
I wouldn't even go there.
But
First thing they'd say is, you're on the school committee. How dare you?
No, okay, good. That,
So, your point is valid. And I do understand, you know, I have a CPA brain too, and I understand the budget side of it, but the parent side of me says, if I can just get one more year of personnel in front of students, I'll take that every single time. That's gonna be my last resort. Even if it means one more year and next year we're gonna have to make these cuts, I'm in favor of doing whatever we need to do to keep those people for one more year. I'd love to be able to keep them all, but I know we have to, we can't. I don't want to drain that fund balance, but it is there. It is a contingency. So for now, I'm in favor of budgeting to the 3%.
Okay, thanks. So I am actually going to make a motion that we budget to 3%. And I guess just as, not as part of the motion, but parenthetically, I guess this is exactly what I was talking about, that I think we're only, at least I'm only realizing this evening, is that if they have the capacity to adopt a final budget on June 30th, it's put us in a completely untenable situation, because we have to notice people by June 1st. So anyway, I'm going to make the motion that we balance the budget to the anticipated 3% local levy. If I could have a second.
I'll second for 34,264, 346. That's the number?
Okay, any other discussion? Mr. Dakotas?
No.
Mrs. Pavo?
No,
Mrs.
no.
Farnworth?
I would like to have a more specific motion that points out exactly how much we're reducing our fund balances by as part of the vote. Or that we're committing to reduce.
So would you like to
fund
make an
balance.
amendment to the motion?
I would like to make an amendment to the motion that we will balance to the 34,264,336, and that will include the commitment to withdraw from the Medicaid fund balance of $838,959, with the remaining 1.3 million deficit that was identified, I don't have the math here, coming from the general fund balance.
Okay. Well, we're on tape, so I don't think we necessarily need to write the numbers, but we should
No.
probably have them written now. So I'll
So,
second the
You second?
amendment to the motion, so now.
Can I just clarify?
Yep.
So these are all just preliminary.
Correct.
Okay. Because I wouldn't want to lock us into Medicaid versus fund balance, because if Medicaid comes in higher, I'd want to take more from fund.
Right.
Okay, so this is all just
So
a
the-
preliminary look at the numbers.
So
Okay.
the motion is to balance to the 34,264,336 with an amendment to the motion, to the main motion, that recognizes that that is,
Currently,
that anticipates a drawdown from the fund balance, totally, the total fund balance. Is that right?
Can I withdraw my amendment?
Yes, you may, as in, I think,
I just don't want to be locked in,
Okay. I
agree with
taking
you.
it from one way or
Okay.
I
another.
agree, I
If I
agree.
may, Mr. Chairman.
okay, so
Yep.
we're back to Jerry's
We're back to just
motion.
34,264, 336.
And we need a second, right?
no, it's been seconded, we're just in
Who was the
discussion.
second? I missed it. Who was it? I missed
Deb
it, yeah.
seconded, I
Was
think.
it Deb?
Yeah. So the motion was to balance to
3%.
a total budget of 34,264,336. Motion made by me, seconded by Deb. We're at discussion because Diane just withdrew her motion, her amendment. So, Diane, I believe you have the floor if you want to have anything else.
Just one more thing. When will we plan to take a final vote? Would that be
I don't think we can until after the,
post-June 30?
yeah,
That we would actually adopt our budget?
final budget, yeah.
That's the only question I had.
Okay. I don't think we have any ability to do anything else.
No.
Okay. Deb?
Do we need to vote on the layoff notices tonight, or are we doing that next week?
We have to do that in an executive, I think.
No, we're going to do it
Executive
next.
tonight and then open next week.
next week.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Peter.
Mr. Chair, may I?
Here.
So you're voting a number, that's the amount allocated from the town council. You're recognizing that you're still 1.3 million short. I think you have to
Right.
also vote to allocate 1.3 million out of.
No, we can do that after they've adopted a final budget. What we're doing right now is deciding that we're gonna balance our budget to that number.
To that 3%, correct?
Okay,
No,
right.
but I think
you're not
Peter's,
balanced.
yeah,
You're-
Peter's point is it's really the projected level service budget of 36,216, 650,
Less,
less 642,284 for 35,574, 366, 34,264, 336 coming from the the town council's appropriation, which means the 1,310,030 will come from other sources.
Well, that's kind of what Diane wanted, but in a way, what we're just saying is our
I
intention
think
is.
Peter's concerned that you don't want, your budget is not 34,264, 336.
No, but the point is that none of this is final. Because what we're saying is that our intention is to balance to the 3% local
Not
levy
balance
increase.
to the 3%. How about if we say it is, our intention is to balance with the 3%
Okay.
appropriation.
I think the intention is the same.
I mean, we have the slide.
Yeah.
And I just said it. We know what we're voting on.
All right.
We're assuming the 3%. We're going to look at the 64.2, we're going to, assuming 642,284, and then that means the 1,310,030, is that what it was?
Yes.
Has to come from somewhere else.
Yes.
We acknowledge that.
And the point is that we're doing this in order to, because we have to make the decisions about eliminating positions.
Correct.
Now, nothing is finalized because it can't be until we know what the state aid number comes in.
Right.
And what the final budget that the town council adopts is, and to a certain extent, what the books close at in terms of the operations and Medicaid.
I think we'll be taking a vote before that.
Yeah, so I think.
Maybe.
I think
I
to
mean-
your point, the motion clearly intends to balance our budget, assuming the 3% is in fact
The final.
voted through.
In good faith.
Yes. That is not your budget.
Any?
Hope
Okay.
not.
No.
Big problems
It's on
with this.
tape, Peter.
Thank you,
All right.
Ms. Palish.
Any additional discussion?
You can see your face.
I'm going to ask for a vote. Mrs. Palish?
Yes.
Mrs. Farnworth?
Yes.
Mrs. Pavo?
No.
Mr. Dakotas?
Yes.
And I vote yes. Motion passes 4-0, or 4-1, sorry. Okay. Yes. Can I ask for a motion to move into executive session?
I'll make that motion.
Under-
Oh, you're, sorry, you gotta.
You gotta
No,
spell
I
it
gotta
out.
cite
You're always
the-
welcome
Do you have
as
the
personnel.
quote?
so.
Do you have the section there, Mike?
I have got it.
it?
No, I don't have it.
I
It's in the wrong
have
bill.
it. I'll make the motion to move into an executive session, Rhode Island General Law 42-46-5, A7, legal advice, fiscal year '24 budget.
Is there a second?
That's all in here.
Take a roll call vote. Mrs. Palish? Mrs. Farnworth?
Yes.
Ms. Pavo?
Yes.
Mr. Dakotas?
Yes.
And I vote yes, so we're in executive.